They thought I was thousands of miles away and powerless, but the moment a military convoy rolled into our quiet suburban street, the same HOA board that sold my home without permission suddenly forgot how to speak. If you love stories where arrogance meets consequences, hit subscribe and stay with me, because this one gets wild. I was deployed overseas when the letter arrived at my empty house, a letter I never saw, a letter that would change everything, because while I was sleeping in a sand-filled tent halfway across the world, the homeowners association in my quiet suburban neighborhood decided that my silence meant surrender, that my absence meant opportunity, and that my service meant nothing compared to their so-called bylaws, and it started with something small, something petty, something that should have been a simple courtesy call, but instead became a calculated move to take what wasn't theirs. You see, before I left for deployment, I had done everything right. I had filed my paperwork, set up automatic payments for utilities, arranged lawn maintenance through a local service, even emailed the HOA president, a woman named Linda Carver, to notify them of my temporary absence and provide emergency contact details, but Linda had always had an issue with me, not openly hostile, just the kind of tight smile that never reached her eyes, the kind that lingered too long on my uniform whenever I pulled into the driveway, as if my presence disrupted her perfectly curated image of the neighborhood, and apparently, while I was gone, the lawn service missed 2 weeks due to heavy storms, the grass grew longer than the regulation height, and that was all the excuse they needed. First came the violation notices, then the fines, then more fines stacked on top of those fines, each letter sent to my empty mailbox, each deadline passing without response because I was on patrol in a desert thousands of miles away, and instead of calling the emergency contact I had clearly listed, instead of emailing me, instead of doing the decent thing, they voted in a closed meeting to escalate, claiming property neglect, and according to some obscure clause buried deep in the HOA charter, they declared the home in breach of community standards and initiated a lien process. But that wasn't enough for them. No, what they did next was the part that still makes my hands shake. They claimed unpaid assessments, fabricated numbers inflated with penalties, and moved to foreclose under the pretense of protecting property values, and because no one contested it, because I wasn't there to fight back, because the notices kept going to an empty house, they pushed it through faster than it should have legally been possible, and within 3 months of my deployment, my house, the one I bought after my third tour, the one I renovated with my own hands, the one that held every memory of my late father teaching me how to fix a leaky pipe, was sold at auction. I found out when my neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, somehow tracked down my unit through social media and sent a message that simply read, "Call me ASAP. It's about your house," and I thought maybe there had been storm damage, maybe a break-in, but when I got him on a shaky overseas connection and he told me strangers were moving furniture into my living room, I felt something inside me fracture. I contacted the HOA immediately, but Linda's response was ice-cold, rehearsed, as if she'd been waiting for this moment, telling me that all procedures were followed, that notices were sent, that the property was lawfully transferred due to delinquent fees, and when I mentioned the Service Members Civil Relief Act, the federal protection designed specifically to prevent this exact situation, there was a pause on the line, just a flicker of hesitation before she dismissed it, claiming it didn't apply because I failed to respond, and that's when I knew this wasn't ignorance, it was arrogance. What they didn't realize was that I wasn't just some isolated soldier without resources, I was part of a network, and the moment I brought the situation to my commanding officer, the tone shifted, because the military does not take kindly to civilians exploiting deployed service members, and within days legal assistance was activated, documentation was pulled, deployment orders verified, and it became clear that the foreclosure was not just unethical, it was illegal. The buyer, a young couple who had no idea about the circumstances, had been told the property was clean and free of dispute, and when military legal contacted them, explaining the violation of federal law, they panicked, and I can't blame them, they were victims too. But the real panic set in during the next HOA board meeting when 2 uniformed legal officers attended alongside a civilian attorney specializing in service member protections, and suddenly Linda's confidence evaporated. Emails surfaced showing that multiple board members had questioned the speed of the foreclosure but were overruled, that they had my deployment notice on file, that they deliberately chose not to delay proceedings despite clear federal guidelines requiring them to do so, and as the investigation widened, it uncovered something even uglier. A pattern of aggressive fines disproportionately targeting homeowners who were either elderly, deployed, or otherwise less likely to fight back, because it turned out the HOA had been using liens and forced sales as a revenue stream, flipping properties quietly through connected investors. When that revelation hit, the community erupted. Neighbors who once stayed silent began demanding answers. Local media picked up the story, and what was supposed to be a quiet, profitable transaction became a public scandal. But here's where the twist deepens, because the military stepping in wasn't just about my house, it triggered a federal review of the HOA's entire foreclosure history, and the same clause they relied on so heavily was found to be improperly applied in multiple cases, meaning my situation was just the thread that unraveled their whole operation. I was granted emergency leave to return home, and I'll never forget driving down my street and seeing a military legal vehicle parked outside what used to be my home, neighbors standing in clusters whispering, and Linda standing on her porch looking smaller than I had ever seen her. And when the ruling came down, it was swift. The sale was voided, the lien invalidated, the title restored to me, and the HOA was ordered to cover all legal fees and damages, including compensation for emotional distress and temporary housing for the displaced buyers. But consequences didn't stop there, because during depositions, it was revealed that Linda's brother-in-law had indirect ties to the investment group that purchased foreclosed homes in the area, and once that conflict of interest surfaced, resignations followed, investigations deepened, and criminal charges were discussed. The same board that once sent me violation notices for grass height now faced federal scrutiny for fraud. I thought reclaiming my house would feel like victory, and in many ways it did, but what surprised me most was the sense of responsibility that followed, because neighbors began knocking on my door, sharing their own stories of intimidation and pressure, and together we organized, petitioned, and ultimately dissolved the existing HOA leadership, replacing it with a transparent board that prioritized communication over punishment. Months later, when the dust settled, I stood in my backyard, freshly cut grass beneath my boots, reflecting on how close I came to losing everything, not because of war overseas but because of greed at home. And the irony wasn't lost on me that the people who claimed to protect property values nearly destroyed the very integrity of the community they were sworn to serve. Linda moved away quietly before formal charges concluded, her once immaculate reputation reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at neighborhood barbecues, and the young couple who had unknowingly bought my home ended up purchasing another property down the street, becoming close friends after everything we endured together. Because sometimes justice doesn't just restore what was taken, it builds something stronger in its place. If there's one thing I learned, it's that silence can be weaponized, absence can be exploited, and rights mean nothing unless someone is willing to defend them. And I was fortunate to have an institution behind me that refused to let exploitation slide, but not everyone does, which is why this story matters, because somewhere out there another deployed service member might be trusting that their home is safe while they're gone, unaware that a fine print clause in a power-hungry board could be plotting otherwise. And if my experience serves any purpose beyond personal vindication, I hope it's this. Know your protections, document everything, and never underestimate what can happen when the wrong people are left unchecked, because the day the military stepped into my neighborhood wasn't just the day I got my house back, it was the day accountability moved in and fear moved out.